any questions that you have, any fears that you have, any challenges that you're having currently with looking for a job. Maybe you have a job offer, you've just started, you're about to start. Just let us know there, and I'm going to try and see if I can join the teams in a different way. I'll be back in a second. Sorry, Yangi.
Morning.
Morning, Zanele.
Thank you. I was checking if I'm in the right place.
Yes, I can confirm you are Zanele. You're in the right place. Thank you. Just a note to the ones who just joined us, like Zanele and the others. We're having technical issues with the facilitator, so she's busy sorting that out. So just bear that in mind, and please have patience. And thank you.
Youngie, hi, I'm back. Looks like I can share now. I'm so
There we
sorry,
are.
everybody.
There you
I
are.
am not winning with Teams this morning. Okay, but it looks like I can share. So I'm going to go ahead and share. I'm so sorry, everybody, but luckily it is being recorded. And thank you so much for joining on a Saturday morning. At least I gave you some time to grab some coffee. Youngie, thank you so much for your patience. And we're going to go right into it today. Okay, so let me make sure that I've spotlighted myself if I can. Oh, wait, that's another way. Okay, I think let's just go right into it. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I really appreciate that. Okay, let's see who's doing screen one. There we go. Please let me know if you can see the screen. You can see I was having real issues here. Let's get into our Canvas session this morning. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not giving me another browser, so I'm going to quickly log into my Canva. You can see the screen, right, Youngie? You can see it coming up?
Yes, Gerald, we can.
Okay, perfect. That's all I need to know, and then we can get right into it. Thank you so much for your patience, everybody. Let me just take a breath. I'm frustrated because of Teams, but let's get into this today. So in this session, we've been doing some amazing discovery around what the real world of work is like, hey? And I think what we've been, and I really appreciate everybody sharing their insights and their questions and their fears. We want to keep that going. So today's session is going to be looking into what happens when you get that all important staff card. So if you're going to be going to a physical building for your work, you'll be issued with one of these, and you'll have to swipe in at the security, either at your office or at the entrance of your company. And that means that you are officially in the organization and you are now an employee. So for those of you who are joining for the first time, I've had 16 types of these experiences. Well, some of these job titles actually have been when I've been in a freelance role or working in my own business. But I've been to a few. I've had a few staff cards in my life. Let's just put it that way, right? And so, what we're really getting out of these sessions is trying to lose some of that mist of confusion of what is the real world of work going to be like, because there's certain expectations that we have that might not be meet the reality. And that's honestly why I started the work that I'm doing, because I kept seeing this over and over again in graduates as they went into the world of work. And perhaps I got to know them because I was working on bursary support. And so we interacted, and then I would follow their journey into the world of work. And 2-3 years into it, they felt very disillusioned. All that hope that they had to change the world had dissipated because they faced a reality that they weren't prepared for. And for me, it was really sad that young people who are so full of passion and energy and this desire to make the world better, I don't want you to lose that, you know. So that's why I want to prepare you for what's ahead, show you what is ahead in the world of work, so that you are more prepared for the reality and that you don't lose your magic. That's really what I'm about today. That's really what I want to do. So we've covered in this module already, how do we find that first or second job? How do we handle interviews, which is in-person online interviews? How do we assess a job offer? We did that on Wednesday, and we had somebody who is operating in the role as an HR manager in an IT space, what they look for when it comes to employees, what they expect from people who are working remotely, how to over communicate when you are busy with remote or hybrid work. And so if you've missed that session, make sure you catch the recording. It'll be in the Teams group. You'll be able to find it there. But today we're going to be looking at, now what do you do? You've got the job, you've signed the contract, you got your start date, you're all nervous the night before, you picked up your outfits, you've packed your lunch, maybe you haven't packed your lunch, but now you're thinking, okay, my first day on the job, what's going to happen, right? And then the next two sessions we'll look at next week is when the honeymoon is over, because we looked at the stages of integrating into a new job. And then how do we then create healthy work habits? So we'll cover those two sessions next week. But again, remember, this is your safe space. This is a discussion, a place of learning. So if you have any questions, have any comments, please put your message in the comment section, or also then just raise your hands when we come to the comment section question time. and ask a question, because you might be thinking about something that somebody else is also thinking about. So these are the questions that we will be covering today. Number one, how do I show up on my first day? If you haven't had your first day yet, what can I expect when working with my team? And this could also maybe create some anxiety, right? So let me know in the chat if you do have any anxiety or questions around how you'll maybe be perceived in the workplace, in your team. How will you work with difficult colleagues, perhaps? What are some of your fears or anxieties around that? And then how can I demonstrate that I'm willing to learn? How can I showcase that, yes, I have a postgrad degree, maybe more than one, and there might be a perception that people with advanced degrees in inverted commas think they know everything. So you want to overcome that perception by showing that you're willing to learn and apply your knowledge in a real world environment. How do I interpret my payslip? Very important, because that can be a whole nother language to understand. Taxes, what do I need to know about that? We covered a little bit about the tax bracket in the previous session. And how can I become a valuable team player? So if you have any other questions or comments in the session, just let me know, and then we'll get into that. So what does it mean to show up in the workplace? When you're thinking about your future employer, when you're thinking about getting into a job, something that has come up a lot in these sessions is the perception that if I go into a job, there'll be less flexibility, because right now, yes, I do have my pressures, I do have my deadlines, but for the most part, I can kind of work at my own pace to meet that deadline. So I think there is a very good awareness that that will not be the case when you get into a job. There'll be shorter time frames. You won't have that much control as you do now, perhaps about how you work. So let me know if there's any questions or comments around that one. Let me try and get into the chat. Not there. Here. Any questions or comments around that? How will you deal with the flexibility around that? Okay, so I'm not able to see the chat. So if you can unmute or raise your hand, and then we can maybe discuss that. Anyone with a question around that? Maybe you feel you don't want to let us hear your morning voice, but if you have a question, just let me know. Otherwise, we can continue. Anybody? Question, concern around that? Okay, no, that's fine. Let's continue. So if you haven't thought about this, maybe that's why there's no questions. If you haven't yet thought about what does it mean to show up, I think it's a very good thing to start thinking about, because what does it mean, right, to show up? What are your employers' expectations? We had the previous session on Wednesday, and the HR manager was talking about they want to see somebody that is doesn't have to be babied, in the sense of like you come with your own proactivity. So you are communicating your tasks, you're showing up with enthusiasm, you're trying to solve problems, not be a problem, right? Because a lot of times when you get into the world of work, you'll discover that there are some employees who tend to be the problem to getting work done. I've worked in many environments, as I've told you, and it was always fascinating to me that there were some people that just showed up to work to prevent work from happening. And so as I am someone that I know I like to get things done quickly, I was always frustrated with colleagues that seemed to just show up to be at work, but to not work. And I was like, how does that? But that doesn't actually quite work. So what are your expectations? Maybe in actually sharing that, my expectations was that I would work with a team that had the same mindset as me, that had the same kind of, energy and passion and things, but also knowing that I'm different from other people. And so the biggest thing here is to understand that there's a golden rule here. You don't have to like everybody, and not everybody is going to like you. There might be some people that you come across in your team. That's why it's important to understand what are the team dynamics that will really irk you. They will become your living nightmare sometimes, because for some reason that personality, that type of person just rubs you up the wrong way. So we're going to cover self-awareness just now, but it's important to understand why. Why is this person making me crazy? Okay, so what are the team dynamics? And as much as people and their behavior and their actions will be affecting you, your behavior and actions will be affecting other members in the team. So it's important to understand that duality. that as much as the team dynamics affect you, you also contribute to that, right? So important to be aware of that. That's actually going to be, like, I would say 60% of your work, because you need to collaborate with other people. Your tasks are dependent on other people in your team. So not knowing how this works is going to be a challenge. And then what will it look like when I win? So now it's important for you to understand, we spoke about job description on Wednesday versus the job description versus your actual work. So if you keep looking at your job description and using that as the only guiding tool of what it is that you need to do, you will be frustrated because job description is just a guide. What actually happens in your role, the kind of tasks that you'll have to do, might change. It might vary. It might change every 3 months. Okay, so this is often the biggest challenge that people who are starting their first job understand, because no one takes the time to tell you what your part of the job, how that impacts the bigger picture, right? So it's important to, when you get there, to start figuring out, if I contributed this report, who gets this report? Because often your manager is too busy to tell you the reason why they said, I need this information by 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Often it's because they have a deadline to submit it to their superiors, but they're too busy to say that. So if you want to really understand and to have less frustration with your role, figure out what cog do you play in the machine, and understand what your work, how that helps the bigger picture. Because once you do that, it'll help you to understand, okay, this is why this is important, and you'll be more motivated to be more diligent in your work. So this is something I would say is my secret of work. And this is what most people won't do. So it is a secret. It is something to kind of think about and consider how you might take this approach as you go into the world of work. And the biggest thing is, what most people won't do is consider their job as a business. So I've written this article on LinkedIn about 5 signs to see whether you're an entrepreneurial employee. And I can honestly say that if you take this approach, you are going to be less frustrated. You may or may not impact the team as much as you'd like, but taking this approach of being an entrepreneur is going to help you. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. Firstly, a reminder that no job is going to give you identity and value. Yes, there'll be a part of us that will look at that. So we want to apply our jobs, ourselves to our jobs. We want to do well. We want to succeed. We want to achieve. There's nothing wrong with that. But always remember that in these key areas, which are interrelated, interconnected in your life, by the way, you bring your identity and value to relationships and to your job and your career, as well as to your finances. You have to bring your meaning to this. This is why we spent the first module going deep into purpose, values, belief systems, all of those things, because that is actually at the crux of what will help you to succeed or not. Because any job that you have, whether even if it's in your dream company with your dream type of leader, it will be challenging because you will be forced to confront your strengths, your greatest strengths, as well as your greatest weaknesses. So consider it to be the best of times and the worst of times. That's really what I see my time at Stellenbosch University. It really was that, because I did not know at the time that what I was facing as a kind of frustration was that the environment inside higher education was not the best fit for me and my personality, because I'm actually an entrepreneur. So I'm much happier and more productive when I'm able to run my own business and do things my way, because then I can decide who am I going to work with. I can determine the pace of things, you know. So that's what I've noticed in myself over the past years. But in every job that I've had, it's always been valuable. It's always taught me things about what I'm thinking and feeling around relationships, and how do I see my value in terms of the work that I can produce, and what is my earning potential and capacity, right? How are these skills that I have in my job going to contribute to me having more money and keeping more money? So let's think about team dynamics. Okay, I think we've covered this one. Yeah, so in order for you to understand what it means to really bring your identity to your work, bring meaning to your work. So having an awareness that it's not going to give me everything that I need. I have to learn how to give those things that I need to myself. But what is it that I need? Okay, so that's where we start. A good understanding of yourself. So this is why I was talking about journaling. If you're somebody that is able to get more insight by speaking to somebody else, like as you speak, you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I think, this is what I believe, I didn't know that. Figure out how you learn about yourself. And like I said to you, the workplace is going to show you your strengths as well as your weaknesses. So every job that you have is going to give you feedback, some of it negative, some of it positive, but as you are opening up yourself to being open to the feedback, and by feedback, I mean, sometimes there might be colleagues that are just mean. They're just mean, and they're very negative people, and they always find problems in people, and maybe they decide that they just don't like you. They just don't like you. And so they might give you feedback about your work or how you impact the team, and it may or may not be based in any reality. What the major relationship that you have to nurture is your relationship with your manager or your team leader, because that determines many things. It determines promotions, it determines, getting feedback on your performance. And I have to say this as well, not all managers are leaders, and not all leaders are equal. So we can often, when we get into a work environment, tend to place our manager on a pedestal, because we think, okay, well, they're leading, they have this position, they're probably getting more money than me, so they should know everything. They don't know everything. So you have to discern, what is their leadership style, in a sense? And if the manager is somebody that is themselves have a high level of self-awareness and adopts a more coaching style in their leadership, that person will definitely give you some good feedback. They might say, I've noticed these aspects of your work. When you take on this task, you tend to avoid it. This is the reason, and this is maybe how you can adapt that. So, I mean, I gave some feedback to some of our student interns. I remember once there was a student intern, and he hated databases, and he had to do databases for my newsletter. So he kept avoiding the work. So one day I sat down to him and I said, Fellini, you are really good at many things. You're very hardworking. Why do you not like databases? And he said, oh, Cheryl, it's just boring. It's so boring. And so I said to him, okay, understand the reason why you are doing the information. If you do the database and you give me the right information, then when we send out the publications, we have less returns, because he was also responsible for getting the returns from the alumni newsletters that were being sent out. And so that was a good thing for him. He saw, okay, yes, if I don't get the addresses right, there's more returns that are happening. And I said, databases may be boring, but they're an important part of our work. And he actually took that on, and he really changed his perspective around that. And years later, I met him at a mall, and he said, Cheryl, the day you told me about databases, I didn't like it, but you really helped me, because now he was working at some kind of sports management company, and one of his major responsibilities in his job was database management. So him being open to feedback, and obviously I tried to deliver it in a way that I would want to receive feedback. So maybe not everybody is as self-aware, but I knew what I was missing in terms of when managers don't give you the right information. So that's him being open to that helped him in his future jobs. So understand this. Every job that you have is preparing you for your next job. I'm going to repeat that. Every job that you have is preparing you for your next job. And yes, there will be parts of your job that you maybe resent or get frustrated about. So get curious about, why do you not like this part of your job? We spoke about in previous sessions how work is not equal as well. There'll be parts of that job that you really don't like. Perhaps, this is also your learning. It's your experimentation time. You've been busy with the theory of it. And so in your mind, you've conjured up these castles of imagination of how it's going to be in the real world. And then when you get into the real world, it's very, very different from the textbook. The textbook is theory. The real world is application. And so it might be something, and we had this in previous sessions where one of the attendees said, in the workplace, they expect you to think on your feet and to be more adaptable and to kind of come up with real world problems. So actually being able to do the work, whatever that means, You're going to have to be more practical. How do I apply this thing? All the theory that you've learned might not fit. So that's okay. But what you've learned is how to learn, okay? So that's the basic thing that you are always going to remember, is that your time in university has given you the skill of how to learn. So when you're faced with something that maybe you feel intimidated by, maybe it's a technical task, or maybe it's doing a report, or maybe it's working on a software program you have not used before, please be open to asking a colleague what to do. Because sometimes the barrier for us growing in our jobs is feeling like we should know everything, especially if you feel like people are judging you because, oh, you have so many degrees, you can't use this platform. Maybe you didn't have exposure to that. That's okay. So you need to understand that when you are in the workplace, try and figure out who in the team is more approachable, who in the team you can see is kind. You want people who are kind, who are helpful and willing to share information and willing to show you the ropes. It might not even be a manager. It might be somebody else along the team that you can say, hey, I don't know how to use the printer. There's maybe a setting or something. Please, can you show me that? There's nothing wrong with asking for help, especially in your first 3-6 months. People expect you to ask questions. If you take too long to ask questions after 6 months, then you feel less able to ask questions. So in the first 3 months, give yourself time and permission to ask questions, because you are still learning and you are still growing. Okay, there's nothing wrong with asking questions. So self-awareness is not just knowing yourself, but also is understanding how we are seen by other people. So your time at university has largely been working a lot on your own, okay? But now when you get into the world of work, you'll be working a lot more with others. And yes, you've had some, for example, group work experience. So think about what it felt like to do group work. When you're doing group work, there were some members on the team that just did not do anything. And even though you've tried to get them to do something and they were promised to do it, but they never did. And then you ended up having to do that yourself. So that group work experience should give you a little bit of indication of what it might be like in the real world of work. And so the problem is sometimes, especially if you are people orientated, you can get stuck in the injustice of it all. Why are the other colleagues not working? And why is no one dealing with the situation well? And the reality is that you are there to grow yourself. You are there to improve your skill sets. And a big part of that is going to be learning how to work with other people. In the next session on Wednesday, we're going to look deeply into relationships with yourself and with others. And so we're going to go a bit more into that. But begin to start getting used to practicing how to be more self-aware. I can tell you this really helped me a lot in my jobs, because I'm somebody that is very empathetic. I pick up on energies and I pick up on disharmony. So for me, my biggest value in a group is harmony. So when there's disharmony, it really, really affects me, because this is what makes me a good facilitator, a good trainer, a good coach. I can pick up on things and when people are at, right? So my greatest weakness can also be my greatest strength. So asking yourself, for example, maybe somebody upset you. Why did I say that to my team member? Often we ask ourselves that, what made me say that? So shift from why to what. What was the underlying thing around it? And external self-awareness is how we are seen by others. Okay, so here it's important to start to get some feedback. And obviously not the first week when you get there maybe, but as you start to see who your safe people are in the organization, when I say safe people, people that you can connect to. Again, it might not be a manager, maybe it will be a manager. People that you kind of have similar energies. You will most likely connect to people who are like you in the organization. That's okay. But make sure that you don't shy away from dealing with the difficult personalities that you find difficult, because it's going to be that way in any organization that you go to. I remember going from one university to the next university with a very strong inkling that when the personal challenges I was having was going to be amplified in the next organization, because it was something I had to deal with, right? So we can't outrun our growth. We have to face our growth. We have to face our giant. So I want you to take some time now If you have a notebook or pen that you've, or if you would like to do your reflections basically on, just writing things down, then I want you to just make sure that you use this as your reflection time, because your authority figures is really going to affect how you interact with your manager. So take some time to write down. This is your Saturday morning. You probably in your pajamas still with your coffee. This is going to be important because this is going to be the majority of what you experience in your work life. Your relationship with your manager. It's either going to make your work environment wonderful, or it's going to make your work life horrible. So this is very serious. I want you to think about this. Think about how you relate to current authority figures in your life. Think about lecturers, professors, people who are maybe managing your supervisor relationship. What are the challenges there? How do you feel? Do you feel that they're unfair? Do you feel like they are mean? Do you feel like they're evil? Or what is that level of relationship? And what do you think you can change in that relationship? Do you feel like you can change it? Do you find yourself talking about your most problematic relationship with an authority figure to other people, to everybody that will listen, but never to the person themselves, because you feel like you can't change it? If that's true with your current authority figure in your life, in your university environment, you will most likely copy and paste that in your next environment. And the only reason for that is because we take ourselves with us. We can't avoid ourselves. So this is also something to understand. If you've experienced a violent or difficult relationship with either of your parents or a significant adult in your life, then you can be operating out of fear. And this is something to really, really address. Are you fearful of authority figures, or do you feel able to be a true self around them? Now, this is really important because I noticed a pattern in my own life. In my personal family life, my dad was very violent. And so I was in fear a lot. I was stuttering in high school. I had a lot of psychological barriers against authority figures. So I was afraid of them, essentially. And I found that because of the dynamic of my dad being the dangerous one and my mom kind of being the safer one, I kind of looked at managers in that kind of two-headed way. So often in my work environments, there would be one manager that I just felt was always difficult, could not speak to them. And I would circumvent that manager by I would find a manager that was, a bit more complicit, a bit more kind, and I would kind of gravitate towards them. It was shocking for me to realize that this is what I was doing in terms of my work life, because you think it's separate, but this is why I keep saying it's all interconnected. So when you can understand the dynamics in your own personal relationships and find your voice in your personal relationships, it's going to be much easier to use your voice in your professional relationships. Because I'd learned that it was not okay for me to say no, I was into people pleasing a lot. And so when you are in fear with authority figures, you go into one of four things. You either fight, so maybe you're combative to say this will never happen to me again, and so you keep being combative. And if you don't address that, you might be perceived as being as someone who is creating conflict in the work environment, and not able to work collegially with people. Not to say that there isn't a place to speak up, but if the fight response is very strong, and all you see is that I have to defend myself so that I don't get hurt. I know it's getting very deep now, but it's very important. Then you will end up being in that fight response. Another response is to flee. You just kind of run away from the situation. And that might mean that you try to avoid getting into the workplace, or you sabotage it because you just don't know how you're going to deal with it. So you just kind of keep running away. But that's also a sabotaging tactic, because then you never actually move forward. Fawning, this is what I would do a lot. So fawning would be trying to make my manager happy all the time, because growing up in a violent home, you tend to learn how to be hypervigilant. And so any sign of disharmony could be fatal, right? So that's where your hypervigilance kind of comes in. So that got me into a lot of workaholism behaviors. I overworked, partly also because I felt like work was a place where I was getting some identity. There were some things I could do. So there were some skill sets that I had that had some good results. So then that became addictive, because even though I didn't feel worthy or deserving as a person, my job gave me that kind of fix. But then it was something that I would pursue. And that's what workaholics do. They get their identity from their jobs. Not healthy, because you go into cycles of burnout. You end up taking on too much. You keep saying yes to projects, and then you end up not being able to really deliver on them. And freeze, I think I've seen this response probably in a few people that I maybe think, why are you not working? They just kind of do what they have to do, but they don't have an opinion. They don't move things forward. They don't, they're not proactive in their roles. They're just kind of like, they're just there, you know? Maybe you've already had some work experience, so you understand this, but it's something that actually is very, very interesting. This is something that has always been intriguing to me in every single job that I had. I was speaking about the golden thread, in your work. So your job is going to start giving you some clues about what you really want to pursue in your purpose. But also remember that. So yeah, make sure that you will have these questions in the slides that I share on the group. So I want you to really think about this as you're preparing your CV, as you're preparing for the interviews. This is something that is really at the core of your healthy work relationships. If you can figure out, okay, you know what, I've actually had some trauma in this area. I'm going to keep looking for my job, but I'm also going to maybe get a counselor to help me with dealing with these shadow things in my life, so that when I get into the job, I'm going to be more in control of my thoughts around people in authority. Very important. If this has resonated with you, please pop. Okay, you can't actually put that in the chat, but let me know when we do our questions if it really has helped you. Now remember, not everyone thinks the way that you do. So team dynamics, we're still talking about team dynamics. So remember, we did this in a few sessions ago. And I keep bringing this up because it's important to understand that, firstly, knowing yourself and knowing how you come across to other people. So you have a primary color and a backup style. So mine is red. I'm a primary red and a backup green. So let's look at how I could be perceived in a work environment. So I'm very action orientated. I want things to happen now, tomorrow, quickly, spontaneous, right? I don't like schedules. I don't like bureaucracy. So this is why it's difficult for me to work inside a higher education environment, because you really have to wait for things. It's dependent on so many other people. So in teams that I've had, and it's funny, when I would have my farewell tea, for example, people would say to me, I remember this one tea, there were two people that said, yeah, when you started, I didn't really like you, but over time, I grew to like you. I was like, oh, thanks for your honesty. And I realized it's because I maybe have this certain urgency about things that I want to do. And so when I go to maybe the gold, okay, the gold is someone who needs details. She wants to maybe plan things out. So yours, a red, comes into our office and says, oh, we have a donor. They want to do an event. It has to happen on Friday. But she needs more time, So then they perceive me as being somebody that is maybe forceful or aggressive, but I'm just trying to keep the donors happy. So this is the green side of me, who looks at what is needed for the relationship and how we can go about that. So think about where you fall in. So the blues, for example, we had somebody in one of the previous sessions, who asked the question, I'm someone who likes to tell the truth and stick with facts. So people have told me maybe comes across as aggressive. And now blues are people that they tend to focus on the logical versus the emotional. So if a blue speaks to a green is somebody that prioritizes the emotional aspect, the relational aspect. So they feel first, and the blue thinks first. Now, what will happen in a meeting between a green and a blue? The blue is talking about all the things that have to happen and the facts. And they have a discussion that they see as a debate. Okay, I'm debating with you. We're discussing the facts. But the green, who looks at the feelings, will first feel attacked. Will first feel attacked because this person, if is looking at these facts in a very logical way, without any kind of other people elements involved in it. So they might feel like this person is being very mean or critical. And so the green might start crying, and the blue will say, why are you crying? We're just talking about facts. So and that has happened in a few cases. People have said that, yes, that's true, that's me. Okay. So understand that you need to take one day at a time because each day is going to give you new learnings about how you come across to people and how you interact with others. And so very important to remember that each team member is different. And you can even use this as a kind of template when you get to your new workplace. Don't tell them, oh, you're a gold or a green. I'm like, what are you talking about? But analyze who are the members of the team that have these different personality types. Now, there's many different types of tests you could take, but understand that they are planners, they are doers, they are feelers, they are thinkers, essentially. So that's what you want to do. So figure out who's the planner, who's the doer, who's the feeler, who's the thinker. And then when you speak to each one, say you're the green, and you have to speak to the blue, then you go to the blue with facts first. You go to the red with action first. You go to the goal with the plan. So a lot of your work is going to be the emotional intelligence development of how do I speak in other people's language? How do I collaborate? It's not manipulation because you're trying to get what you want. That's a dark side of it. But you are learning what other people need, and you are adapting your information to give them the information that they need first. So if the goals had come to me and said, Cheryl, we actually have 5 different events happening and we can only have this date available, which eventually they do give me that information, and I take that back and I explain that to the donor, right? So think about how this would work in a team dynamic. Any questions or comments as we go along? Any questions, anybody? No questions. Okay, we're going to keep going. I feel like I'm alone in this call, so I'm going to go to my presentation, and then I think people are going to listen to this when they get a chance. So think about this. Think about what value do you bring to the team? And you can even do this before you get to your first job. Okay, think about what value you bring to the team. So go back to those sessions where we looked at your core values. Go back to the sessions where we looked at what is your purpose. Go back to those sessions where you looked at what is it that I want to get from this job? How is this job going to be part of my journey? How am I going to use this role to take care of my plan? Okay, so what value do you bring to the team? Perhaps and also look at your value in terms of not just your technical skills, but your non-technical skills. So if you are a green going into the team, then what you bring into that team is a sense of relational connection. And people are looking for that. So as far as you feel safe to do that, then make sure that you deliver that unapologetically. And also with the green, someone who feels first, you also prepare for times when you need to be alone, because you take on a lot of emotions, you take on a lot of feelings, and you need to be able to process that. How do you plan on handling conflict? I can say that blues have no real issue with that, but they need to first learn how to be truthful and kind. Greens tend to shy away from conflict. Reds, I think they don't notice that it's happening because they're busy with stuff. They also tend to shy away from it because they want to rather get the work done and do it themselves. That's the maybe challenge with the reds. And the goals, they probably just need a plan, right? So for them to deal with conflict, they also probably shy away from that. So there will be conflict in any work environment. Your job or your role there is to try and stay professional as possible. Your work colleagues are not your friends. They're not your friends. Although you see them every single day, you can be friendly with them, but they're not necessarily your friends. once you leave a job, 6 months after you leave the job, any friends that you've had will most likely lose touch. So make sure that you are getting your relational needs met outside of your job, okay? Because in your work environment, you can connect to people, and you can maybe, I mean, I've had some people, maybe one or two, that after I've left a job, we've still stayed friends. But that's not always possible. Okay. So make sure that you're understanding that you are actually in a place where you come there to work, you come there to connect with people, but make sure that you are taking care of your mental health and your fitness and all of that outside of your job. It's important. No one else is going to take care of that for you. Another thing to think about is, how will you open yourself up to feedback? Okay, so you will have maybe a monthly, or every 3 months, you'll have a chat to your manager about your work performance based on your KPIs, your key performance areas. But what you want to do is maybe think about how you can get this input in other ways. So, as you are working weekly on your emails, or somebody says, hey man, that was a great job, or you can maybe sense that there was something you did that wasn't so great, you can go to that person and say, hey, how can I improve next time? I could see that, some things were missed here, and I'm sorry about that. I want to make it better. How can I do that? I think if you are sincere about that and are willing to take on what people are saying, it will be very helpful. And again, finding a mentor, a coach, getting a peer group that can just, where you can chat about how your professional development, very, very helpful. Another question to ask is, how will your work habits start? What work habits will you start to establish to bring your best to work? We'll look a lot more at work habits in one of the upcoming sessions, but it's about, how do you show up every week? How do you plan your work? How do you, how do you perform on projects? These things are all part of your personal brand. These things are all helping you build your character, and they become what people remember about you. So I also know that, after I've left roles and I had to say goodbye to people, people will say, Cheryl, we miss your professionalism, or we miss your work ethic. So what you've done in that role will stay in people's minds. And sorry. Sometimes the way that you work will also open up other avenues. So there was one situation where I was working with a colleague. We were both managers. She went to a different university, and when she was there, there was an opportunity that opened up, which I applied for, and I was able to work there with her, but then she was now my manager. So understand that in the new world of work, these relationships can also cross over into other organizations and other patterns around that. I think she was not very comfortable being my manager, but we actually worked well together in an organization, and so we kind of crossed over to a different organization. So understand that when you are working, the way that you treat people is going to impact what they feel about you. And remember, people do work, and people give work to people that they like, know, and trust. So people don't like you if they don't trust you, and if they don't know you, then there's no room for promotion. Now, also saying that, I have to also give you a caveat to say that most of my managers will never have supported or understood the person I am now. Okay, in the sense of it's what I do today is not part of the job description of what I was doing there. And they might have a fixed view on you, and that's okay. It's not their job to build your profession. That's your job. So think about, in your role, how will you identify technical and non-technical skills that you need to develop? And then how will you take charge of your own learning and development? So once you get there, so this is what I mean. When you get to the job, maybe there's a certain software that you need to know that you actually need to do a small short course on. Okay, that's something you'll need to do. And so how will you put that in? Other aspects of learning and development would be, okay, I'm finding difficulty in speaking up in meetings. What can I do with that? So there was a person that I coached one of the challenges was that she needed to do public presentations to a group of people, which also involved the directors of the company. And every time she was in that environment, she kind of clammed up, she shut down. And she was very frustrated at that. But with the coaching, she was able to understand the core belief system around that, and she was able to turn that around. This is my new saying. Organizations cannot return loyalty that they expect from their employees. They're buying your time, not your soul. And this is something that I think South Africans really struggle with. We are very loyal people because we are also told that we should be grateful to have a job. And that sounds good, but sometimes that gratefulness can also mesh into people-pleasing behaviors. And so we don't speak up. We don't maybe challenge things that we need to because we're scared to lose our job. And this is why it's important to connect your finances as well to your work, because not getting into debt, having your emergency fund, having an exit plan if you need to leave is so important. What happens often is that when people, I'm going to skip this because I'm not sure if people are on the session. What happens when you are in a situation where you feel trapped in a sense, then you kind of shut down, you go into survival mode, you start getting resentful, and that's not healthy. And I remember for many years, I would feel grateful for getting a job, even though I had lots of experience and I proved my competency. So that was something in me to ask myself, why was I feeling grateful for having a job? So the narrative that you've learned about work is also so important. How do you see work? Once you start at a job, you can start figuring out, what do you really think about work? Do you see your intellectual work at university as more noble than perhaps working in a corporate or other forms of work? What do you feel about that? There's no right or wrong answer. That's your own philosophy on work. My philosophy on work has changed over time. When I started out in the world of work, I was 17. I needed a job. I needed to start earning money. I was studying part-time. And so I kind of got into my professional life by default, not by design. It's only been over the past decade that I've been shifting more from default into design and figuring out what work I love to do and what work I can do and how I restructure that. Because also having your own business brings a flexibility as well, but also brings risks with it. So yeah, that's something to think about as you go along. Is work something that you have to do, or is it something that you get to do? And even our spiritual beliefs can come into this, because perhaps in your faith, that impacts as well how you see work. Some belief systems might say that work is not important, just being spiritual is important. And then so you feel this clash. There might be some belief systems that say work is noble and holy, and it's something as you're doing unto God. And so then you are very committed in your job. And that could also maybe be a bit to your detriment because maybe you work too much as well. So think about this. Think about, what philosophy do you have around work? Because what you think about work is what's going to impact how you approach it. Your first week, your first month, your first year is going to be rich with learning. So make sure you get everything out of that. Again, getting a coach, a mentor, or peer group to help you is going to really be good. And something else to remember here is it's important to remember your financial targets. Remember, we started at season 1. We're building up to the final, the end game here, right? But your first season, your first 30 years, your first 3 decades, when you start working, is to establish your financial stability, start your freedom fund, start to figure out what is my place in the world and what is my purpose? What am I here to do? Okay, fundamentally. Season 2 here then is, okay, how do I build this now? So here's your foundational years in a sense, and here's how you start building on this foundation. So your areas of interest, the things that you've seen that you love to be good at. Perhaps you started at a job, and this is also something to remind you of, is that often people, I think, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I choose the wrong job, Cheryl? I've heard this so many times. And I always say, whatever choice you make, it's going to really help you down the line. Trust that when you go in a direction, it's going to take you to where you need to go. That's the only thing I can say, is to trust that you will find your way. because every job will teach you something. You are testing out your sweet spot. And that's why I want to prepare you for the frustration ahead. And also there will be a joy of discovery ahead. So it's twofold. You can't have one without the other. And so what you want to do really here is making sure that you start your financial plan early. So don't just buy the car, the most expensive car that you can afford, or they say you can afford. Don't just buy the house because everyone else says you have to buy the house. Think about what it is that you want to do. And as you work, you'll discover that. You know, if the question people ask is, if you never had to worry about money, what would you do for free? You start discovering that here. And you don't know if you can pursue it then, but actually as you grow, you'll start to see, hey, I actually want to do more of this. I would do this for free if I could. And that's where you want to stay, because that's going to build a lot more of your earning potential. A job is never going to make you rich. You'll never get rich working for somebody else. There's benefits, because obviously you would go now into the payslip section, and there could be a lot of things that help you get started. But your financial goals have to extend beyond your job, because eventually you want to get to the stage where you really felt like your life has counted for something and your work has had meaning. So now we go into payslip interpretation. I found this online, so obviously it's open information, but I just copied and pasted it here because this is something that a lot of people are struggling with. So how do you interpret a payslip? So yes, you're doing all of this work and you're growing, and now it comes to the financial remuneration. Okay, so let's look at a typical kind of payslip, and if you have any questions, we can discuss it at the end. So basically, how to interpret your payslip, but each payslip will be different, obviously, but this gives you an idea of it. So your tax number, we'll go into how you get your tax number just now, ID number, staff name, the department you work at, and your medical aid, and then your employee number, which goes in your staff card, like I said, and also then your payment date. So most of the time it's on the 25th, sometimes on the 23rd, but you will definitely, you'll be looking out for this every single month, payday. And that tells you when you get that. Okay, so here, this is where we want to focus, because this is what we don't like to see, but it is there. So your actual total earnings is not the same as your deductions, right? And so that's where we don't like SARS, because they take all of our money, basically. So your tax amount, this is your UIF, unemployment fund. So if you do get unemployed, they pay you, they pay the stipend, and then you can go to UIF and claim for at least 3 months of your salary. It might not be 100% of your salary, but it might be 80% or 60% of your salary to get you back on your feet again. That's the unemployment insurance fund that South Africa has. And then this would be your medical aid. And here they're saying it's your staff member contribution. Sometimes the employee also contributes as well towards the medical. And here's your total deductions. So what you earn, and that's what your total deductions. Okay. So let's go into here, cost of employment. This will be like what they call cost to company as well. And so in this example, this is the employer contribution as well to your medical aid, your bank details, for example, and then also what they will sometimes do is show the annual amounts as well. So they'll show you the monthly amount and then the annual year accumulations, and then there's your net pay there. So this is what you get in your bank account. So what else is here is pensionable amounts. This organization has a pension. So this is something that, like I said, although working in a job is never going to make you rich, what it does help is to build your financial stability. Because if you can't yet start doing this for yourself, at least your company is starting to do that, and you can always add more to that. So you want to get a diversified portfolio. So if they're already giving you a pension, you might want to look at an RA or a tax-free savings account as well that you'll add to your financial plan. Okay, but this basically shows you all the different aspects around their retirement fund, their fringe benefit they talk about. So it's included. So each employer is going to have a different offering for their staff, different benefits, financial benefits. Important to understand that. And then here they also show your leave. Okay. So generally they will discuss this with you at the beginning of your job. They might offer 15 days of leave or 20 days of leave. And so when you apply for leave, it gets logged on a system. They have to monitor it that way. And it's part of your package as well, because they're paying you for the day to not be at work. So it's part of the leave portion. That's part of your contract. If you don't take your leave, they will force you to take your leave because it impacts on their payroll amounts. It's a bit complicated, but anyway, it'll show up here how much you have left. And this is obviously higher education institution, so they got study leave benefits as well for the academic staff. Okay, so yeah, payslip, it's, if you have any questions about your payslip, always ask your HR person and then they will explain that to you. But make sure you know what it's about. Taxes, if you don't have a tax number yet, what you need to do is just use this link. I'll send it to you in the slides, and you sign up for to be a registered taxpayer, and SARS will issue you a number. So you will need that tax number when you start your job, so that the payroll system can log you onto their payroll department can log you onto their system. So that will also then be on your payslip, basically. The tax number is here. So what happens is they will basically submit this stuff to SARS with all the deductions and all the information. So that's kind of automated, and that is pulled through to SARS on the system. So it's the IRP5. It's the employee's tax certificate that is issued to them at the end of the year. And it's generally around July that tax season opens for that to be submitted. Okay, so yeah, you can get someone to help you, or you can do it on your own. I get someone to help me. Questions and comments. Let me see if anyone has questions or comments. Anyone online today? Anyone questions? No. Okay. So basically what I want to share is my learnings from my 25 years of working. Bringing your best to work means that you understand what is your goal in this job. And that might change over time. So it's important to start reflecting, every month, every 3 months. Is this still what I want? Is this really helping me? Yes, you have a question. You are online. Yeah, there's somebody here. Hi,
my hand was my hand was
I couldn't see. Sorry.
Time.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see on this side.
When you eventually asked, I've lost my trail of thought. Anyway.
Oh, sorry.
My question was, when you raised this issue of speaking out and being your authentic self.
Yes.
I wanted you to help on the implications, because what I've learned, I've been in the workplace for quite some time, human resources.
You in HR.
Yes. You speak out because maybe you're that kind of a person that is genuine, you want to speak out. But the world of workplace always has a way of sorting you. They may not sort you now, but it's a matter of time.
But when you say sort you, what do you mean, Zanele?
Like, you're a big mouth, if I may, then you have to deal with that.
Yes.
Maybe you successfully eventually get out of that organization because you don't really feel like you can speak out and be yourself. Then in a small community like in Eswatini, you find that this sorting out has went out even to other employers. Now you are unable to even get back to the workplace because there's a narrative that is being sold about you, which is one-sided. How do you then rebuild from that?
Well, Zanele, good question of a real-world example. So I want to ask you, let's backtrack a little bit. Have you been to the previous sessions where we looked at purpose statement?
No, unfortunately, I joined. I think the last two sessions.
Okay.
Yes, I missed the first ones.
Okay, but they will be online, right? So I want to ask you this, since you've asked a question, and thank you for asking questions. I don't feel all alone today. What is your dream for your career? What do you want to do?
That's interesting.
Mm.
Do I still have the dream? Honestly, I don't think I have a dream anymore.
How long have you been working, Zanele?
I've been working for 15 years.
Okay, that's why you feel like your dream is lost. Because
Yeah.
this is what happens, right? We get into the world of work and we kind of get pummeled a lot, because we have this ideal. We have this sense of who we are, and we want things to be in a certain way. So what will it take for you to dream again? I'm going to coaching mode now, but I'm glad we're having
Yeah.
a session. That's great.
And I'm open to that. I think what will take for me to dream again now is to get a feel that authenticity is acceptable in the workplace. Because I change
Mm,
places and I see that authenticity is punished. Yes, we can teach this thing and say people must be
yeah.
genuine, but there's always a price. I found that when you're authentic, you must be ready to also accept the repercussions that comes with it.
Very true. And I think also depending on the environment, um, yeah. So even if you speak up and maybe not heard, then what do you do? So like you said, you either leave the environment, but then leaving the environment, where do you go? So my other question is going to be, how tied are you to your current location?
How? What did you say? Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, how tied are you to your current location? Are you rooted there? Can you uproot to a different area maybe?
Well, I've always lived in Swaziland, so you kind of get
Mm,
used to your environment, but there's nothing really that ties me apart from you're used to it, and that's all. That's all you know.
mm,
Mm,
mm.
mm.
So Zanele, I'm gonna challenge you again, because I think like what you said is to not be yourself, to not speak up, to not be authentic in a work environment is very, very debilitating, because it kind of shuts you down. It makes you stop dreaming. Okay.
Mm.
And we're getting to survival mode. And this has happened to me many times. This is why I can share this. And survival mode, we're not meant to live there, because survival mode is that we just kind of accept what we've been told, or we accept the narrative,
Mm.
right? So I think what's important for you is to start figuring out, what do I want to do? Firstly, how much money do I need to live? Okay, because we covered this in the financial literacy session. So take your ideal monthly income that you want, right? So do it now for me. Don't tell me the number, just write it down. Okay.
Mhm.
How much do you need, not to survive, but like to be able to invest money, to take care of your monthly expenses, and maybe go on holiday? Okay. What would that amount be?
Mm.
Write that down. You have it?
Yes, I have it.
Okay. Now multiply that by 300 times 300.
Times 300.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Was that a monthly figure that we were talking about?
Yeah. So your
Oh,
monthly that you need, right? Every month. So
yes.
if I could say to you, Zanele, I would give you this amount of money and you could
Mm,
withdraw this from your investment every month. That's what you need to survive, right? Or to
mm,
live, and to not to survive, but to be able to like have a full life. That
mm,
monthly amount that, and multiply that by 300. Okay. Do
mm.
you have that number?
Yes, I do. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
But that's the amount of money that you need to live the life that you want to live. And I say that, I mean, to do the work that you want to do.
Mm,
So that is a very shocking number, perhaps, but that is what is the reality. So if it's a multi-million rand number, which it probably is,
mm,
then you're going to have to challenge yourself to say, I need to become a multi-millionaire.
mm,
And we can do that not just like overnight. I mean, you could play the lotto, but I mean, there was somebody that won, I think 32 million. He was like 19 years old, the lucky person, right? But aside from winning the lotto, what can we do? So
mm,
investing our money, finding the skill sets that actually make us valuable. So Taneli, if you
mm,
had to come to Johannesburg, I'm pretty sure you would find opportunities, and maybe not perfect work environments, but work environments that maybe would be open to, people being challenging in healthy ways, right? So I think that that's part of the challenge is if you're saying that there's nothing holding you there, there is something holding you there. It's a subconscious thing holding you there. Why haven't you made the move? And it's difficult to leave a place you've known your whole life. And I'm saying this because my family as well is in the process of immigrating. It's one of the hardest things you could ever do. But sometimes you have to disrupt yourself. You have to uproot yourself to be able to live the life that on the inside you were meant to live. And it's not just a selfish thing. Yes, you have to take care of yourself and be loyal to yourself too. But it's also about what skill sets can you bring to the world? What problems can you help to solve that the world needs you to solve?
True.
Yeah.
So
I've got a book that I've written called Managing Money in the Real World. I've shared that some copies as well for the post grads as well at Stellenbosch. It talks about how to connect your purpose to your money. And so if you're finding yourself in an environment where you're not welcome, you're not celebrated, you're not accepted, then the challenge is how do we create our own table? Because this is something I always do in my coaching sessions to say, is it difficult to be a Black person, an Indian person, or a white person in this role? Maybe it is. Maybe that is true. What else could be true? And the other question is, what else can I do? Because I've also been in environments where I felt like I was being victimized because I was from the outside, I was from this other area, all of those things. Those things were true. But what was also true was that I had some skill sets that I was bringing to that environment, and I was still able to do amazing projects in the midst of that space. But if you are finding that things have shut you down, then the biggest challenge for you is going to be, where do I go so that I can grow?
True.
That's the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Thank you,
Have you considered moving to another area?
I have actually, Cheryl, I have, because one thing that as much as my dream has kind of died is that I'm a very, when I work, and that's kind of the thing. When I work, I
Yes.
work, and sometimes
Yeah.
overdo it. So I know I
Yeah.
can survive wherever, and I've worked in international spaces, well, local but international organization. I know I can survive. I've just not explored it, but I'm open to it. Yeah.
Yes. You sound very determined, and I like that you have already had international experience or work even based remotely, because the world has opened up a lot as well. So perhaps part of your journey is to consider entrepreneurship, doing something for yourself on your own and building a consultancy or something. The answer is within you, Zanella. You know what you have to do. You're just scared because it's such a great big thing.
I tell you, thank you.
You're welcome. If anyone else has a question, please unmute. I cannot see if you've raised your hand, unfortunately, on my settings on Teams. Anyone else with a question, please unmute and go ahead. Anyone else? No, looks like we are good for now. Thank you so much, Danielle, for the question. I think what you shared is something that a lot of people face, that they go to the workplace thinking that their voices will be heard, but it's not, So I just want to share something as well. Well, I'm sharing about some of my learnings about the different jobs that I've had. But in a recent job that I've had, I was very frustrated with some of my colleagues because if you think about a soccer team, I don't need to play soccer, but a soccer team, and now you have to kick the ball to a colleague, and they just like look at you and think, okay, what is this ball? What are you doing? And so for someone who wants to get things moving forward, I was very frustrated. So I did speak to the person. I tried to address it with the person directly. And then I also expressed my frustrations with my manager and the director. Nothing changed, but I was proud that I spoke up, because in previous roles, I would have kept quiet about it, and I would have complained to my husband, and he would have said, stop complaining to me, right? So, you have to really think about, what is my approach to work? What is my approach to life? What is my approach to money? And who am I really, and what do I want to do in the world? That's the most important thing in the world. And one thing I've learned, many things I've learned, but one thing I've learned is never try to please your manager. I've tried that. I just ended up being a workaholic. What you can do is focus more on the outcomes of the job, what really matters. The things that really made me feel like I was doing something significant was when I was able to facilitate the donation, and from the donor, I go through all the rigmarole of getting it into the system and the bursary process and all of that. And at the end of that process, there was somebody who was probably praying for funding. You know, many of you probably have been in that situation. And because of my work, that person got their funding. So that has been my motivating factor. So find what that will be in that job. Find the thing that is going to give you fulfillment in your job. So for me, it was also like getting the donors together with the students. It was all of that stuff. And again, very important, no manager will ever see your full true self. It's your job to unlock your full true self, not theirs. And like Zanelli was sharing just now, sometimes when you speak up and you challenge, it's opposed. And then you tend to shut down because you feel like you should be able to speak up. And obviously, I'm sure she's done it in a very professional way. She's done it in a very non-combative way. But if there's a kind of survivalist mindset, a kind of like, well, this is the company ethos, if you don't like it, leave. When you see that, then you must build a plan of what kind of people do I want to work with? What kind of work do I want to do? And how can I make that happen? You have to give yourself permission to live your life. You have to give yourself permission to do things that seem crazy. And because we are in such a permission-based culture, I would say, it's often the most difficult thing to do, because to step out of what somebody else has said you can or can't do takes guts. Because you now have to say, I have to build my own sense of self and my own identity for myself. And so you have to grow as you go. I always say this because every single job that I've had, and if I look back now, I can see that when I felt the most broken in terms of, when I was going through the traumas, like the time when I was beaten up by my ex-boyfriend now, and had to go to work. I wasn't able to be a high-performing person, but I was in crisis mode. So when I was in crisis mode, I was not the best employee. I did what I could, right? And so I had to forgive myself for not being a good employee, good in terms of what does that mean, right? But being able to be a more productive employee. But as I healed and as I took care of myself and as I began to see my own value, that's when I could decide the one day in a work environment, you know what, it's not my job to convince. I had two managers at the time, worst thing ever, to have two managers who were like opposing in their styles. It was horrible. And in a meeting with them, I realized in that moment, it's not my job to make them see how difficult this role is. I'm not the person for this role. And that's when I felt like, okay, now I can go. And so your work journey, your professional journey is going to be a spiritual journey. Really, it is, because our work is so connected to who we are. Our worth is connected to what we feel that we can have value and worth in the world, right? So it's a journey, it's a process, like I said. And one thing I can tell you, they really don't miss you when you're gone. So it's so hard for us to leave a job, but eventually, somebody else is then employed in a position. So at the moment, my husband is in the process of exiting his job. And this week he found his replacement. It's very humbling when you find someone to replace you, because this thing has become your life and blood and sweat and tears, and someone else does it. So have a healthy distance from your job. I know it's not always easy. Have a healthy distance from your job, but have a very close connection to your work. That's a very different thing. Your work is the thing that you can't stop thinking about, that you want to do all the time, that you volunteer to do all the time. It's taken me a while to find my work. And now that I have found that I realize is my engine. It's my economic engine. It's what I will keep doing to be able to earn an income, but also to feed my soul, my purpose, the thing that makes me come alive. So I know I started late, everybody, because of Teams. I will try and get this sorted out for the next session. But this is going to be a fun one on Wednesday, when the honeymoon is over. And Zanelli kind of brought this up a little bit in what she said. Working for 15 years, you try and speak up in the workplace, and then it's kind of opposed, right? And so what do? How do you work with difficult people? How can I improve the way that I work in my team? How can I build my relationship capital? What have I been expecting from this job? And how can I find other ways to fulfill my needs that might be outside of this job? How can I build a healthy balance in my job? A good one also is, how can I get more clarity around my work duties? Often we don't know how to ask what's most important now, because also people are figuring it out. Work is a shifting thing, right? So how do I keep staying on top of what I'm supposed to do? Because otherwise I can get lost in a sea of confusion. And how can I showcase my value, not just to my current job or people, but then to potential employers in the future, to the industry? How can I start to build my thought leadership and show people what I'm really all about? So that's going to be in the next session on Wednesday. Please stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for joining this morning. The session is recorded, so you can go back to the notes, and it will also be in the comments in the Teams group as well. Have a good weekend, everyone, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Cheryl.